So here is something that should not be possible inside that family. An 8-year-old boy running down a palace corridor in tears, with his fist closed around something so tightly that a member of staff thought at first he had hurt his hand. No cameras anywhere near him. No press officer within 100 yards. Prince Louis, 8 years old, crying in a hallway before an official function, holding on to a piece of metal worth less than a decent watch. And about 4 seconds behind him, the voice that stopped the entire room. For decades, the rule inside that building has been that senior royals do not argue where anybody can hear them. Disagreements go into a private secretary's diary, get handled in a side room, and come out the other end as nothing at all. That is not politeness, it is machinery, and it has been running for 100 years. I want you to hear it the way the people in that drawing room heard it, because it did not come out as a polite royal correction. Princess Anne came through that door and put one sentence into the middle of the room, aimed straight at Queen Camilla. How dare you hurt him? Before we go any further into what Camilla tried to take off that little boy, why Louis was left in tears, and how William and Charles reacted when they found out, take a moment to subscribe and turn your notifications on so you never miss one of these. Quick word before we go deeper. I am Harold. I spend my time going through everything that moves around this family. The household records, the filings, the stories that get buried before anybody finishes asking questions. And what you are about to hear is me putting the pieces together the way I read them. Stay with me to the end, because the reason Camilla went after that pin is not the reason the palace gave. And the last part of this is where the whole thing lands. I am going to hold one thing back from you for a while, and I want to be straight that I am doing it. There is a document behind this afternoon, an extremely boring document, and it is the reason the whole story turned out the way it did. If I hand it to you now, it is a piece of admin and you will shrug at it. Give me 20 minutes and it will make your jaw drop. Let me tell you about the object first, because everything in this story hangs off it. Louis is the youngest of William and Catherine's 3 children. He turned 8 in April this year, and the country has watched him grow up in a way it never watched his father grow up. You have seen him on the balcony pulling faces. You saw him in Glasgow at the start of this month at the Commonwealth Games, with George and Charlotte. The 3 of them together in public the way that family now does things on purpose. Quick note before we continue, everything I dig up that doesn't make it into these videos I put into a free weekly letter. Join more than 10,000 royal insiders at crownletter.com. The link is in the pinned comment below. If you're watching on your TV, just point your phone at the QR code on screen. That is the thing about those 3 children. The country has watched them since they were babies, and the country feels something about them that it has never felt about a royal child before, because it has been allowed to see them behave like children. George looking bored, Charlotte telling her brother off, Louis doing whatever Louis is doing at any given moment. None of that is an accident, and none of it is a press strategy. Think about how different that is from the generation before. His father and his uncle were raised under a system that treated visible feeling as a fault to be trained out of a boy. Louis is being raised by 2 people who decided deliberately that their children would be allowed to be people first. And honestly, that single decision is the quiet revolution inside that house. A couple sat down and chose to run their family differently from the way both of them had been raised. And everything in this story comes out of that one choice. William and Catherine made a set of decisions early on, and they have never moved off them. The children go to school like other children. They are photographed twice a year and left alone the rest of the time. They are allowed to say they are tired. They are allowed to say they do not want to, and they are allowed to miss somebody out loud. Sitting right at the center of that decision is the grandmother none of the 3 children ever met. Diana died in Paris on the 31st of August 1997, more than 20 years before Louis was born. He has no memory of her and never will. And yet she is in that house every day because William made sure of it. He does it through photographs on a side table, through stories told at bedtime, through small objects that belong to her and have been kept for the exact purpose of being handed down. Statements and anniversary appearances have nothing to do with it. Those are for the country. This is for the children. I keep coming back to why he does that, and I think the answer is not complicated at all. William was 15 years old, on the 6th of September 1997, walking behind his mother's coffin in a dark suit while a million people stood on the pavement and watched him do it. Nobody protected him from that. He has spent the rest of his life making certain his own children get something he did not get. And I want you to hold on to that, because it comes back 3 or 4 times before the end of this. Everything that happened in that drawing room happened because a man who lost his mother at 15 decided his children would never be told to put her away. The family moved to Forest Lodge in Windsor Great Park in October 2025, on a lease reported to run 20 years. New house, same rule. Diana's things came with them. That brings me to the morning it happened. There was a private family gathering arranged before a major official court function. Senior royals in the reception rooms beforehand, the way they always are. 30 minutes of standing around with drinks nobody finishes while the cars are organized outside. Earlier that same morning, William had given his youngest son something. A small vintage silver lapel pin. The vault has nothing to do with this. There is no inventory number on it, no insurer attached to it, no curator who signs it out of a case. A modest silver pin that belonged to Diana in the early 1990s, kept privately by William for years and passed down to his youngest son that morning as a quiet piece of family continuity. The choice of that particular morning is the part I find myself thinking about. William did not hand it over at Christmas, or on a birthday, or on any date with a meaning attached to it. He gave it to his youngest son on an ordinary morning before a work event, which tells me he wanted it to be ordinary. He wanted the boy to have his grandmother's pin in his pocket, the way any child has. Their grandmother's something in their pocket without a ceremony around it. Picture an 8-year-old with that in his jacket. He is not thinking about court dress. He is thinking that he is carrying his grandmother into a room full of adults, and that his dad trusted him with it. He had it tucked inside his blazer, and he kept checking it was still there, the way children do. And he did check, several times. Staff who were in that room remember him putting his hand flat against his jacket, the way you do when you are carrying something that matters and you have not got used to having it yet. That is the whole crime, by the way. Keep that in mind for the next 20 minutes, because everything that follows was triggered by a boy wearing his grandmother's pin inside his own jacket. Now picture the room. Those pre-event reception rooms are not grand in the way the pictures make them look. Furniture pushed back against the walls, a couple of tables with glasses on them, 6 or 7 senior members of a family standing in 1s and 2s, a dozen staff moving through with trays and lists, and everybody watching the clock because the cars leave when the cars leave. The atmosphere in those reception rooms was relaxed. Family, a bit of noise, staff moving through with trays. And then Queen Camilla noticed the silver inside young Prince Louis's jacket. According to sources close to household staff who were in the room, she went straight over to him. She went past William. She went past Catherine. She stopped in front of the 8-year-old. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because the choice of who to speak to is the whole character of the thing. Both of that boy's parents were standing in the room. Either one of them could have been taken aside in 4 seconds. The correction went to the child. She told him the keepsake was not appropriate for a young prince to wear at an official function. She put it in terms of court protocol, formal dress standards, the way things are done, and she said it to a child who had no idea any of those words applied to him. And she said it in front of people. That is the detail I cannot get past. Staff with trays, aides with folders, other members of the family standing 6 feet away with drinks in their hands, and a small boy being told in front of all of them that something about him was wrong. Then she went further. She insisted the pin be taken off and handed over to palace staff for safekeeping, on the grounds that personal family mementos have no place in a public-facing court environment where every detail gets photographed and picked apart. Now, stay with me here, because this is the moment the whole thing turns. Try to hear this from where the boy was standing. He is 8, a very senior adult. One of the most powerful people in the building is standing over him, telling him that something on his jacket is wrong and has to be taken off him and given to a stranger. He does not know what protocol is. He does not know what a dress standard is. He knows one thing with total clarity, which is that his dad gave him this that morning and now somebody wants it. Louis tried to hold on to it. He explained it the way an 8-year-old explains anything, which is honestly and badly. His father gave it to him. It was his grandmother Diana's. He wanted to keep it so he could remember her. He told a room full of adults exactly why the object mattered, in the plainest language available to him, and it changed nothing. That is the moment it could have ended. Right there. One adult in that room saying, of course, keep it, off you go, and this video does not exist and nobody outside the household ever hears a word about it. Camilla did not soften. She did not step back and let the boy's parents handle it quietly in the next room, which is what any of us would have done. She reportedly doubled down, saying palace rules on formal dress were absolute and that individual exceptions were not being made. Think about the arithmetic in that sentence for a second. An absolute rule applied to an 8-year-old over a pin the size of a fingernail in a private room, before anyone had even left the building. And honestly, that is the part that gets me. It stopped being about a lapel pin the moment the child told her where it came from. Because after that sentence, everybody in the room knew exactly what was on his jacket and exactly whose it had been. Louis broke. He was frightened by the tone, confused by the pressure, and terrified that the thing his father had trusted him with that morning was about to be taken off him by an adult he could not argue with. He closed his fist around the pin, turned, and ran out of the drawing room to find a corner of the corridor where the guests could not see him crying. And that is exactly when Anne came round the corner. Those corridors are long and they are cold, and there is nowhere in them for a small person to hide. He got about halfway down and stopped by a window, because there was nowhere else to go. The timing here is the entire story. 10 seconds either way, and this gets smoothed over, handled quietly, buried the way this family has buried 1,000 things. Instead, the Princess Royal walked into a hallway and found her great-nephew with his face in his hands and his shoulders going. She asked him what happened. He told her. He told her in the broken-up way an 8-year-old tells you anything when he is still crying, and she crouched down and waited until he had finished, and then she asked him one more time who had said it. He told her that as well. Now think about what she was walking into. Her brother's wife, the Queen. A room full of senior aides and family 30 minutes before an official function, with the cars already lined up outside. Every instinct that building trains into a person says you deal with that later, quietly, through the proper channels. Then she went into the drawing room. She did not go and find his mother first. She did not go and find a member of staff and ask what the situation was. She got the account from the 8-year-old, believed him, and walked back the way he had come. Anne is not a woman who works up to things. There was no diplomatic run-up, no polite inquiry to a member of staff, no request for a private word later. Witnesses describe her walking straight across the room, stopping directly in front of Camilla, and going in with nothing held back at all. How dare you hurt him? Then the 2 words that went down the corridor and stopped every conversation in the building. Back off. She told Camilla, in front of aides and family, that enforcing cold protocol on a child who was carrying a memory of his dead grandmother was not acceptable inside a family, and that it never had been. She said it at normal volume. That is what people who were there keep coming back to. No shouting, no theatre, a completely level voice saying the worst sentence anybody in that room had ever heard said out loud. Then she said it again, in fewer words, the way she does when she has decided a conversation is finished. Back off. Nobody in that room said a word. The senior aide stopped mid-sentence, and honestly, from everything I have ever read about how that household operates, I do not think a single person in there had ever seen a queen spoken to like that in their working lives. Now, to understand why that landed the way it did, you need to understand what Anne is inside that building, and it has almost nothing to do with rank. Rank is the least of it, and honestly, rank is almost irrelevant in that room, which is the thing people outside the palace never quite believe. She is the only daughter of Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She has been working for the crown since before most of the staff in that room were born. The court circular totals for last year put her on 478 official engagements against the King's 532, and she covered hers across more working days than anybody else in the family. She is 75 years old, and she outworks people half her age, and every member of that household knows it. And if you want to know what that household actually thinks of her, look at what happened in June 2024 when she was hurt at Gatcombe Park and spent 5 nights in hospital with a head injury she still does not remember getting. She was back on the diary weeks later. She has never once mentioned it since. She also declined the one thing everybody else in that family reaches for. Decades ago, she asked that her own children be given no titles at all, and they have none to this day. Think about what that means. She spent her whole life inside an institution built on titles and refused to spend its currency on her own kids. Anne stands up and nothing formal happens at all. The Princess Royal holds no authority whatsoever over a queen, and everybody in that drawing room knew it. She has 50 years of never once using the family name for her own benefit, and that is why the room went silent instead of arguing back. And there is something about that woman that the country worked out years ago, and the palace still underestimates. She has no ambition inside that family. None. She is not competing for a role. She is not building a position. She has nothing at all to gain from any argument in any room. And so when she stands up, everybody present knows she is not doing it for herself, and that is the most dangerous thing anybody in that institution can be. There is one more piece, and it matters more than the rest of it put together. Anne knew Diana. Properly. The documentaries never got anywhere near it, and the working relationship between those two women was real. Two people who both understood exactly what that machine does to somebody who does not fit its shape. They were never close in the way people imagine, and they understood each other completely, and those two things are not in conflict. She watched what that machine did to Diana from a closer distance than almost anybody. She was in the building through all of it. Through the years, the newspapers ran the marriage across their front pages, through the divorce, through the funeral. She never gave an interview about any of it, and she never will. She was not defending a lapel pin in that drawing room. She was standing on a line that had been crossed a long time before that afternoon, and she picked the moment to say so out loud. The story leaves protocol behind entirely at this point, because somebody in that household went and checked the paperwork. Somebody under my last video wrote that the royals never break a rule, they decide which rules exist that morning. I have not been able to get that line out of my head since I started looking at this one, and you will see why in about 30 seconds. And now I owe you the thing I held back at the start. Every official function of that kind comes with a dress instruction. Boring document. It goes round the households in advance. It says what the men wear, what the women wear, what the children wear, where the decorations are worn, all of it. It exists, so nobody turns up wrong. It gets circulated days ahead so that nobody arrives in the wrong thing, and gets photographed being the odd one out. Every household gets a copy. Every private secretary reads it. It is the most unglamorous piece of paper in that entire building, and it settles arguments because it is the only thing anybody can point at. Somebody pulled the instruction for that function. There was no rule. I read it twice. I went looking for the sentence that would have justified what happened because I assumed it was in there somewhere and had been badly applied. Nothing in that document said anything about personal keepsakes. Nothing prohibited a child from wearing a family item. Nothing required anything to be handed to staff for safekeeping. The pin broke no dress standard, no protocol, no palace regulation, because no such regulation existed for what an 8-year-old wears inside his own jacket. I read that and I had to go back over the sequence twice because it turns the whole afternoon inside out. Every word spoken to that child in that drawing room was built on a rule that did not exist. The absolute palace regulation, the standard that admitted no exceptions, the thing that could not be bent for one 8-year-old. None of it was written down anywhere, because there was nothing to write down. Sit with that for a second, because it changes the entire shape of the afternoon. Camilla did not enforce a rule on that little boy. She invented one in the middle of a drawing room and enforced it on the only person in the room who could not check. And once that came out, the question stopped being about dress codes and started being about the pin itself. Nobody has confirmed what was going through Camilla's mind when she saw it, and nobody involved is ever going to. The pin dates from the early 1990s. Diana wore it in that period, and Camilla was inside that story from the beginning and remembers those years better than almost anybody alive. Nobody has ever confirmed a word of that, and I want to be straight with you that this next part is me reading the sequence rather than quoting anybody. That is my reading of it, and you can take it or leave it. She did not see a dress code violation on that child's blazer. She recognized the thing. Because a dress code argument has a shape, and this had a different shape entirely. A dress code argument is slow. It goes through a private secretary. It gets raised with the parents. It gets settled in a corridor in 30 seconds by 2 adults who have done it 100 times. This was instant. It went straight past both parents, and it did not stop when the child gave the reason. Think about how much sense that makes of everything else. It explains the speed. It explains why she went to the boy instead of his parents. It explains why she would not step back when he explained where it came from, because the explanation was the problem. Every second that Pin stayed on his jacket in a room full of senior royals and staff was a second in which Diana was quietly present at an official function through her grandson. An 8-year-old walked into that room wearing his grandmother, and the woman who spent 30 years living in that woman's shadow reached for a rule that was not there. That is the reason the title of this video promised you, and it is the reason that went round Britain when it finally got out. Not a dress code. Not a difficult afternoon. A grown woman looked at a small silver pin on a child's blazer, knew exactly what it was and exactly whose it had been, and reached for an authority she did not have to get it off him before the cameras outside could see it. And when the household worked that out over the following days, it went through those corridors faster than any official communication ever has. William got there before any of that surfaced. Staff had gone to find him the moment the boy ran, which tells you something in itself about where the loyalties sit in that building. Think about the speed of that for a second. Not a private secretary, not a duty officer, not the press office. A member of staff saw a child crying and went straight to his father. And that is a small thing that tells you an enormous amount about who those people work for in their own heads. He found Lewis standing by a window at the end of the corridor, still shaking, still holding the pin in his palm with his fingers closed over it. William crouched down and let him get the whole thing out at his own pace. He did not tell his son to be brave about it. He did not tell him it was a misunderstanding. He let an 8-year-old finish a sentence at his own speed, which took a while because the boy was still crying. Then he stood up and walked into the reception room, where Anne and Camilla were still facing each other. And he did not do the thing every royal is trained to do. He skipped the smoothing over. He skipped the let us all move on and get through the afternoon, and he offered nobody in that room a diplomatic exit. The Prince of Wales stood next to his aunt. He said it quietly, from what I understand, and he said it to the room rather than to any one person in it, which is somehow worse for everybody standing there. He made it clear to the room that decisions about his children's personal keepsakes and about how his children remember their grandmother belong to him and to Catherine and to nobody else in that building. No office, no advisor, no senior member of the family has any right to police it. Honestly, if you want one moment that tells you what the next reign looks like, that is it. His father spent 50 years managing situations like that by saying as little as possible. William walked in and drew the line in front of witnesses. Then Anne finished what she started. She turned back to Camilla and told her to leave the room. She wasn't asking. The Princess Royal told the Queen to get out of the drawing room, in front of aides, in front of the Prince of Wales, in front of staff who will be telling that story for the rest of their careers. There was no scene. That is what makes it so much worse for her, and I want you to picture it properly, because this is the moment the whole thing turns from an argument into a fact. A room with maybe 15 people in it. Aides holding folders, staff by the door with the car list, her stepson standing beside her sister-in-law. And nobody in that room said a single word in her defense, not one, not even the people whose job it is to say something in her defense. And Camilla went. The staff outside had to redo the arrangements while she was still in the building. Cars reordered, the line of arrival changed, a name lifted off a list and the list reprinted. All of it happening in a corridor she had to walk down to get to her own rooms. She did not appear at the function that afternoon. The official line afterwards was a scheduling matter, which is the phrase that household reaches for when there is nothing else available. Her name came off the arrangements, the cars were reorganized, and the event went ahead without her. That is the part I have been holding since the start of this video. An 8-year-old cried in a hallway at 2 p.m, and by 4 o'clock the Queen had been removed from a royal engagement by the King's sister. And there it is, the promise I made you at the top of this video, paid back in full. Anne did more than tell the Queen off in a drawing room. She took her out of a royal engagement in under 2 hours, over an 8-year-old's lapel pin, and the King did not reverse a single part of it. Charles arrived into the middle of all of it. Put yourself in his position for a moment, because it is genuinely the worst position in that building. His wife on one side. His sister, who has never once backed down from him in 75 years, on the other. His heir standing beside his sister, and a crying grandson somewhere down the corridor. And he had about 90 seconds to decide who he was going to be in that corridor, with staff at both ends of it pretending to be busy. Sources close to the household say he listened, while Anne set it out with no softening whatsoever. A child had been distressed over an act of remembrance. That was the whole of it, and she said it in about 2 sentences. Charles did not defend his wife. He has spent the last few years working harder on his grandchildren than he ever worked on his own children, and everybody around him knows exactly why. He was not there for his own boys in the way he wishes he had been, and he has had a long time and a serious illness to think about it. There is no second chance available to him with William and Harry. There is one available with George, Charlotte and Louis, and he has taken it with both hands. He heard what had been done in his name, under his roof, at his function, and he understood the size of the mistake immediately. Then he did something the senior courtiers were not expecting at all, and I want to be clear about what that is, because it is easy to skip past. Kings do not go and find people. People are brought to kings. There is an entire apparatus in that building designed so that a monarch never has to walk anywhere to speak to anybody, and he went round it. The king walked down that hallway himself to find his grandson. No aide sent ahead. No message passed through Catherine. No arrangement made for later. He went and found the boy. And then a 77-year-old monarch, a man who was raised in a system where adults did not do this, got down on the carpet so he could be at eye level with an 8-year-old. His knees are not what they were. There were staff standing at both ends of that corridor watching him do it. He told Louis that loving his grandmother Diana was something to be proud of, that it was never something to hide, and that nobody was taking the pin off him. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder, said it again in the plainest words he had, and walked him back down the corridor to his parents. I have read a lot of stories about that man over the years, and that is the single best thing I have ever heard about him. It also settled the argument permanently. The king kneeling in a corridor to tell a child to keep Diana's pin was an endorsement of everything Anne had said upstairs, delivered without one word of criticism of anybody. Every member of that household understood the message. Family comes before protocol in that house now, and the protocol in question had not even existed. That is where this left the building. Lewis went to that function. He went with his parents, he went in the same blazer, and the pin was on it. Think about what that took. A child who had been crying in a corridor 90 minutes earlier walked out through those doors in front of a wall of photographers with the exact object he had been told to hand over sitting on his chest. Somebody made a decision about that, and I do not think it was the 8-year-old. The photographers outside had no idea what they were looking at. They took the pictures they always take, the family arriving, the children in a row behind their parents, 40 frames a second of an ordinary royal arrival. And in about 9 of those frames, if you look at the boy on the left, there is a small silver pin catching the light on his lapel. Nobody noticed for 2 days. The pictures went out, they got used small on inside pages. The coverage was about the event, and the pin sat there in the corner of 9 photographs on every picture desk in the country with nobody looking at it. Then the story came out of the household, the way these things always come out of the household. The family did not leak it. Somebody leaked it who had been standing in that drawing room with a tray in their hands, who had watched an 8-year-old cry, and who went home that night and told the people at their own kitchen table about it, and the moment it landed, the country lost its mind. That is the thing about this family that they still have not worked out. A constitutional argument does nothing to people. A schedule dispute does nothing. A child crying over his dead grandmother's keepsake goes through the British public like a current because everybody watching has either been that child or raised that child or lost that grandmother. The story reached the newsrooms on a Thursday afternoon, and by Thursday evening every picture desk in Britain was going back through the arrival frames from an event they had already filed and forgotten. Every broadcaster went to the same picture. They put it up full screen and zoomed in on that lapel, and once you have seen it, you cannot look at that photograph any other way. A little boy at an official function, standing where he was told to stand, doing the job, with his dead grandmother's pin on his jacket, 3 hours after being made to cry over it in a private room. By the second afternoon, the story had stopped being a royal story and turned into a national argument about how grown adults treat children, which is a fight nobody has ever won from Camilla's side of it. The front pages the next morning were brutal. One of them ran the arrival photograph across the whole page with the pin circled and 4 words above it. He kept it on. 4 words, in the biggest type that page had, over a photograph of a small boy standing very straight next to his mother. Think about how much anger is packed into a headline that short. No accusation, no adjective, no named villain. 4 words in a circle, and everybody in Britain understood exactly what it meant and exactly who it was about. Phone-in shows ran on it for a week. People rang up to talk about their own grandchildren and their own keepsakes and the things their own mothers left them, and half of them could not get through it without their voices going. That is what the palace was up against by day 3. Not a royal correspondent with an opinion. A country talking about its own grandmothers. The reaction split the way you would expect, and then it stopped splitting. Some of the coverage tried the balanced approach for about a day, the dress standards argument, the difficult position of a step-grandmother, the pressures of an official function. It did not survive contact with the picture. The country had already decided, and honestly, once the public sees a child crying over a dead woman's keepsake, there is no commentary in the world that can move them off it, and the palace could do nothing with it. There is no statement available for that situation. Confirming it is a disaster, denying it makes the leak a bigger story, and saying nothing leaves the photograph doing all the talking. They said nothing. The photograph did all the talking. Camilla's diary went quiet. 2 engagements came off it that fortnight, and neither was explained. She appeared beside Charles later that month at something long-standing, and every camera in the room was measuring the space between them. She smiled at the right moments, and said the right things, and got through it. And the pictures that ran the next day were not the ones her office would have chosen. There is no recovering a room once the country has decided what it is looking at. William said nothing at all in public, and his silence did more damage than a statement would have. He carried on with the week. He turned up where he was supposed to turn up, and he was photographed with his hand on his son's shoulder at every single one of them. He never mentioned it once. He did not have to. Anne said nothing either, and this is the part I keep going back to, because it is the whole woman in one decision. She gave no interview, released nothing, briefed nobody, and never once let the afternoon become a personal defense of Catherine's children or an attack on the Queen. She was photographed the following week arriving at an engagement in the rain, on time, alone, doing the 200th of that year. And I keep coming back to that because it is the difference between her and almost everybody else in that institution. The rest of them explain. She never explains, and she has never needed to, because 50 years of turning up in the rain is its own explanation, and the country reads it correctly every time. The country filled the silence for her. The clips went everywhere. People who had never had an opinion about the Princess Royal in their lives were suddenly telling each other that she was the only one in that family with a spine. Inside the palace, the message traveled faster and hit harder. You have to understand how information moves in that building. Nothing gets announced, nothing gets written down. A thing happens in one room at 2 p.m, and by 6, every dresser, every driver, every private secretary across 3 palaces knows the shape of it, and the version they know is the accurate one. Every member of staff across those households understood what had been established that afternoon. The 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, sit behind a wall now, and the wall is made of family rather than protocol. Nobody senior gets to reach over it. Nobody gets to correct one of those children in a room on a rule they made up 30 seconds earlier. And if somebody tries, the person who arrives is not a press officer, and nobody wrote a policy. Nothing went on paper. And that is exactly why it will hold, because the version everybody in those corridors now carries in their head is a first-hand one, and first-hand beats a memo every time in that building. That is a genuine change in how that institution works, and it happened in about 11 minutes on an ordinary afternoon. And think about who it protects. George is 12. He will be king one day, and he is already being measured for it by people who have never met him. Charlotte is 11. Louis is 8. Those 3 are going to spend their entire lives inside that machine. And the afternoon somebody tried to take a pin off the youngest one is the afternoon the machine found out where the line is. For William and Catherine, the value of it is hard to overstate. Those 2 have spent years quietly building a wall around 3 children while carrying everything else that has come at them. And the one thing they cannot do is be in every room at once. Somebody else has to be willing to walk through a door. They have spent years building a home at Forest Lodge on openness, on the children being allowed to feel things out loud, on Diana being a warm presence in the house instead of a subject everybody goes quiet about. Knowing that Anne will come through a door for their children is worth more to them than any protocol ever written down. And for Louis, the afternoon will not be remembered as the day he cried in a hallway. He will remember it as the day his great aunt came round the corner and his father stood next to her, and his grandfather knelt on a carpet to tell him to keep it. 3 generations, in one corridor, inside about an hour, all telling the same 8-year-old the same thing. He still has the pin. He wore it that same afternoon in front of the entire country, at 8 years old, and nobody has taken it off him since. It sits in a small box in his own room now, and from what I understand, he takes it to things. Not every time. Only when he wants to. And Diana is all over that, whether anybody in the building wants to say it out loud or not. She spent her entire time inside that institution, being told which parts of herself to put away. Her son has spent his entire adult life making sure nobody does that to his children, and the day somebody tried it, the family closed around the boy in about 4 minutes. There is a version of this family that would have handled it the old way. The pin goes to a member of staff. The boy is told to be a good lad. The afternoon runs on Trodule and everybody smiles for the photographers. 25 years ago, that is exactly what would have happened, and the child would have learned the lesson every child in that house used to learn, which is that the institution comes first and your grandmother comes second. 3 generations stood in a corridor and refused. That is what happened that day. And the whole thing turned on a decision nobody would have noticed if it had gone the other way. If Anne had walked down a different corridor, or arrived 4 minutes later, an 8-year-old hands over a silver pin to a member of staff, dries his face, goes to the function, and learns the lesson that House has been teaching children for 200 years. And the reason the country reacted the way it did has nothing to do with palace politics. Britain looked at that photograph and saw a small boy who had been told to put his grandmother away and had refused, with his father's hand on his shoulder and his great-aunt somewhere behind him, making sure nobody tried it again. That image is going to outlive everybody involved in it. Anne understood something that afternoon that took the rest of them a lot longer to work out. Camilla did not go after a lapel pin. She went after the last thing in that building she has never been able to compete with, and she went after it through an 8-year-old boy because he was the only one small enough to take it from. She lost her place at a royal function inside 2 hours. She lost the room she had spent 30 years being accepted into, and the country worked out why before she finished explaining herself. Thanks for watching. Like it, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. If you'd like more of this, I write a free letter every week. Join more than 10,000 royal insiders at crownletter.com. The link's in the pinned comment. If you're watching on your TV, just point your phone at the QR code on screen and I'll see you there.